Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Carlotta Castelluccio, Cloud Advocate at Microsoft, and this is a new episode of Build Your AI Portfolio with AI Kickoff Challenge projects, a series designed to showcase end-to-end projects that address different domains and scenarios with Microsoft technologies. And if you missed the previous episodes, don't worry, you can catch them up on demand. And also you can try these at home, absolutely, going through the challenge on your own, since all the projects are collected in a Microsoft Learn collection. And we'll be sharing with you all the useful links in the chat. But now let me hand over to these two amazing speakers, Charles Elwood and Vidushi Gupta, that will be building a smart power up with speech and translation capabilities. I'm so excited for this session. So yeah, I will hand over to you. Good luck.
Thank you, Carlotta. Hello and welcome everyone. Today we're going to be building this very good speech translator app. It's an AI app. I'll quickly switch over to the slides. Yes, so there we go. You can scan the QR code and the module is also available at the link that you can see. I'll quickly tell you a little about myself. So I'm doing business analytics masters here at MIT, and I'm a formal Gold Microsoft Learn student ambassador. Over to Charles for his introduction.
Thanks, Vidushi. Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. This is my first one. You've done a couple of these, but my heart's beating into my neck and face right now, but this is cool. So I'm the founder of Solismatica, and I'm a Microsoft AI MVP. And my journey is through custom neural speech. So I'm really excited about building an app using the Speech Studio and some of the AI resources that we're going to talk about today. So back to you, Vidushi.
Yes. Thank you so much, Charles. And here we have our moderator who's also in our chat. Thank you so much, Olan, for doing this for us and having a great Learn module for us. That being said, once again, this is completely interactive and you can watch videos and practice and apply your new skills. You can scan the QR code and also check out the link. Say hi in the chat, and you can also ask any questions that you have during the session. So I'm just going to tell you what you're going to be learning throughout this. It's going to be actually doing speech to text. So you create transcriptions from audio that's recorded. Then you learn how to translate the transcription into a language of your choice, and then convert these transcriptions back into audio. So that's text to speech. Let's deep dive into the problem statement, and I'm going to give it over to Charles now. Charles?
Oh, did I think I lost a little bit of connection there. So there's utility work next door. So this is live. This is what Anna, the producer, was talking about. So yeah, we're gonna, the idea is we're gonna talk about the problem today as in the Learn module is we're working for a fictitious company. They're doing their annual meeting and they're a global company. So but there's going to be languages from all over the world. And, what we're going to try to help is build the bridges between those languages. So we're building an app, and we'll look at the requirements in the Learn Live in a second. But Vidushi, I think you talked a little bit about it, but we're going to build an app that actually, the three parts, it's really, really cool. You speak to it, you see it transcribed using AI into text, then you translate it, and then you output as, a different voice. So really cool stuff. And then, yeah, it's going to be accessible. And, that's the cool part about a Learn challenge project is you can add and modify it as much as you need. They give you kind of a brief requirement level. So as Vidushi and I can attest to, this one was a challenge. It took many hours, lots of lesson learned, and we're going to show you some of the tips and tricks today. But yeah, you kind of speak, you translate it, you pick another language, you see the output text, and then you pick a custom, it's a neural voice. It's not custom, but it's a neural voice that sounds like a real person. So it's going to be really cool.
Awesome.
All right. You want to go? Yep. All right, so I'm going to go, and then I think this was, so we were organizing this late last night, but we're going to learn this before, learning before you do. So you have two requirements. One is set up some accounts for a Power Platform. There's Power Apps. There's the Power Automate that we use a lot. And there's different licenses. And one trick I want to mention before is make sure the environment is set for each of the platforms, because we got into one situation where Power Platform was set up in one environment and Power Apps was in another, even though they were on the same account. And then the Microsoft Azure account, there's, I think, Vidushi, there's a student account too. So if you're a student, you can get credits for a year. And then there's a starter account for if you're not a student that I think is $200, gives you credit towards that. And there's actually a lot of free resources on Azure that you can use and try out right away. So don't worry about the money part, because the value you get, I think, will be incredible, as you'll see in the app we make.
Perfect. Over to Charles to talk about the transcribed text to recorded audio from recorded audio. Yes.
All right. So the first part I'm going to talk about is, I think you got a link to the Learn mod. Overwhelmed when I first started. So what's nice is here, there's some specifications, and it's, I don't know if we can zoom in a little bit, but there's specifications that really spell out all the different, let's say, controls that you should put in. So there's create a Power Apps canvas, add a microphone control, and then label that text label with what is recorded in your voice, right? So that was the first step. So I extracted this out of the Learn module and went straight to my canvas, my Power Apps canvas. So I think that's the next slide. There we go. So once I got into Power Apps, the first thing I did is made sure I set up my connections for just the first part. And you can see here the Azure Batch Speech to Text is one connector that I had to set up. And I'm going to just mention this. There's two different ways to set up connectors. You can set them up in Power Automate, or you can set them up inside of Power Apps. And for a lot of our app, we use the Power Automate version. And the reason is because you can debug and see a lot of the output. And I might show that later. You can run tests and see what the inputs are to each module and then the outputs are. So that was really, really helpful. And then the second one that we had to set up was the blob storage. Oh, to that slide again. So that you'll see that second one is Azure Blob Storage. And that was important because the connector for speech to text use a blob storage to create all its files. So that was a lesson learned at the beginning, was some connectors require certain resources inside of Azure. So I wanted to explain that part. Is I set this up first so that all my resources were ready to go. Oh, next one. All right, and then this next one, so I pulled in the microphone on the top one. I pulled in the microphone control, and then once you press it, I did the on stop trigger. So when it was done recording your audio, you see the Azure blob storage.create file, and it's a little small, but hopefully you can go back and watch this. But that pushes that audio file into the blob storage so that your speech to text API can pull it. So that was critical for me to learn. That was all new. And then from Vidushi, I learned how to set variables inside of Power Apps, which was super, super important, because maybe we can switch to my screen. Oh, is there some delay in the client? So I'm going to show you, if you click on the parentheses X, you can see the global variables and expand on that. But you can see here, this is really, really important that I learned about. So I learned from Vidushi how to set the variables, but then I didn't know what was happening with the variables. And this gives you kind of a live view, this tab right here. So you can, as you push each button and set the variables, the values show up right here. So we'll go back to the slides. Oh yeah, and that's kind of what I'm showing on the bottom, but I wanted to give everyone a live demo. And let me pause there real quick. Vidushi, did you want to add anything, or before I go to my next slide?
I think that's pretty good so far.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Yeah, so we learned a lot, and it was actually like 4 or 5 people on this chain of email going back and forth, and that was so fun. We were learning back and forth from each other. But next slide. And then this is a different trigger I use. So once I had and pushed that audio file into blob storage, I then had to run the Power Automate flow. So I created that flow, and I think Vidushi, you'll talk about how to connect them together in another slide. But you create a flow, and then, I learned from Vidushi again. I set a variable called new text, and then I ran that flow, and you just type in the name of the flow, and then you do a dot, and then it shows you the run command. So you do a run, and then it'll trigger that flow to run. And then you see a dot text send back, and that's the variable I have in the flow. So once it takes that speech file and creates the transcription, that's the variable that I use to send back into Power Apps, and I'll display it in the text box. So that's where it was really cool. This is a variable where Power Apps sends the audio file, and then the text comes back on a different variable, and then I put it into the text box there. Next slide. So this is, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but this is the Power Automate flow. And you could see on the far left, it goes left, down, and then to the middle. But this was a lot of work. There was a lot of stuff here I didn't understand, but I'll walk through in a few minutes the different steps that I struggled with. So we'll go back to next slide. So
Yeah, okay, I can continue from here until Charles back. So these were a few tricky steps that we had to debug through while figuring out the flow. So what was tricky was initially to create a SAS URL for the block storage. We had to use the generate SAS token feature, and so if you can see that the storage account or the blob endpoint is actually using connection settings now. So this was one of the features, and the second one was to create a transcription. We had to then pull in that web URL. So okay, Charles is back. Go for it.
This is great. We have a team. I don't know what's going on with my internet, but this is
No,
the
that's
life
okay.
of live streaming. So yeah, you explained the SAS token. I had to learn a lot about that, but create a SAS token connected to blob storage, and then the transcription. What's really tricky about the create transcription connector is that you send the file in, you create the transcription, and then there's a response from the API. And at the end of the URL in the response, there's an ID. And I could not figure out how to get that ID out, but that's why you see this get transcription. You'll see in the next step. That was my way of pulling that ID out of that URL in the response from the API. So we'll go to the next slide. So here you see it's the first one. So I'm going to show you a little bit later. I used a template, Microsoft Flow, and I'll try to give you a link to that. But that one really helped me out because it gave me stuff like that string, the substring, and I didn't really understand the string, but I could copy it in and make a few modifications to try to pull that ID out of the URL that was coming back from the API. So that's why you see there get transcription list files. What's interesting about this connector is it makes multiple files. One of the files is the actual transcription, and then there's a log file, and I think one other file. And I only needed the transcription. So that's why I had to send the ID back in another call and say, just give me the first ID of the first file. So I understand what you transcribe, right? So, oh, and I wanted to know, so you see there test, and maybe we'll go to my slides real quick. I'll show you something right here. So if you go to Power Automate and see this button. So this is my Oh, is it showing now? Okay. And this test button, once you press the test button, it will run a test, and you can see it goes through each step and it gives you a green check mark.
Yes, we can see the check mark. Did we lose Charles?
And then what the outputs were. So I had to go. Oh, did we lose me again?
No, we're good. We're good.
The green check marks are where you test. Oh, my internet connection, I think, is horrible. So anyways, I'll try to go through this quickly. That debugging, it's super critical, super helpful. All right, we'll go back to my slides.
Yes, the slides are up.
Let me try to think. Let me see if I have the.
Yes. So it talks about OpenAI. Charles, slides are up.
Oh, this is another trick. I use Azure OpenAI Studio all the time, every day, all day. And this is a big one because a lot of the documentation for AI type resources are new. So what I did is I would copy like that substring that I found in the template. I would just copy it into Azure OpenAI Studio, into ChatGPT, and this is GPT-4, and it would explain step by step in language I could understand. And this helped me so much. It probably saved me, at least 10 hours of understanding the code. So this is really important. Oh, if I run the demo, the internet cuts out. Okay. So I'll try not to run any demos and run just from my slides. But I wanted to, I don't know, Vidushi, did you try Azure OpenAI when you were doing this? Yeah, definitely. Super helpful, right?
Yeah. Like I would just tell it, okay, this is the kind of error that I'm facing while creating a transcription. So it would tell me that it was probably because the SAS token wasn't initialized or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Super helpful. And then, I'll probably we probably need to write a blog post on just the studio itself. But all right, next slide. Thank you.
Yes, sure.
And then this is, let's see. So this is kind of the testing. So if you go into Power Automate, and it'll actually keep track of all your runs. And I can't do the demo because it's going to crash on me, but it keeps track of all your runs. And then you see that on the left. So you can click on each run and it'll give you every run and all the inputs and outputs. So you can debug on the fly every single run you've ever had in Power Automate. So I wanted to mention that because it's super powerful and helpful when you're debugging. Next slide. And I ran into a lot of issues because of, like, for example, that connector had 3 different URLs. So I use, from the template, I learned about apply to each. So it went through each URL, the body of the URL. It found the kind tag inside of the body and then did a switch statement on it. And then I had a condition there that said, if it says transcription, I knew that was the transcription file. So it would follow that flow. And I actually, all the other flows, there's a case that just throws all that other information away that I didn't need. But this, I use actually ChatGPT to understand a lot because I had a really hard time understanding how to parse through all the different files that it was giving to me. I don't know, Vidushi, did you, any comments on that or?
Oh no, perfect. Yeah, I think I totally follow the same lead. And we spoke through, used OpenAI, and then were able to get through the transcription phase.
Yeah, this was really interesting for me to learn. And then I learned, I think from Ola, we learned about the HTTP request, which is you can connect to any API, REST API. So I used the get command inside the HTTP request. Oh, there's a little bit of an echo. And that was, you can see right there, I think I said recording of Vidushi and Charles Elwood. It said King of Vidushi and Charles Elwood, but it was really cool because I could actually see the output of the information now. And then I had to, again, parse through that and figure out, was it lexical or ITN that I want to pull out and display on my Power Apps. So next slide. And this speech.microsoft.com is where I went. And this is one thing I wanted to mention is the documentation for Speech Studio is really, really good inside of the Speech Studio itself at this website. So I would go here, get the example code. And for example, I show you there this connector, transfer audio files to text from Azure Blob. I took that template, put it in my environment, and then pretty much ran step by step through that and modified it for my example. And that's how I got through this. If I didn't have this, I don't know if I'd be here standing in front of you today, but this was really, really helpful as an example of the code to follow.
All right, that was pretty great, I would say. So Charles walked you through how to convert your audio into text. And now I'm going to walk you through how to convert this text into a different language. So you just translate the transcribed text. Okay, so how are we going to do this? We'll start with selecting a language to translate to. We'll then make a flow in Power Automate, just like how Charles did, but a different flow this time. We're going to run the flow and then pull the output from the flow back to Power Apps. So 4 steps, but multiple sub-steps. All right. So the first step is going to be that we're going to actually select the language to translate to. So what you're going to be doing is adding a dropdown in Power Apps. As you can see here, which says German selected. So you're going to add languages to the dropdown. To add languages, you can add a list of languages in the items section for the dropdown, items property of the dropdown. And then you're just to make sure that when a user selects the name of the language, it's actually the code of the language is set for the flow, because the flow actually understands the code of the language to translate to. So for example, it's going to be FR for French and DE for German. So what we're going to be doing is on the onChange property of the dropdown, we're going to be selecting a value, setting a variable called selected language that you can see here highlighted in yellow. And this is going to set the value for the selected language. So once a user clicks French, it's going to set to FR, which is pretty clean, I would say, that you don't really have to show the user FR and DE. You can show French and German, and in the backend, it selects or populates the variable selected language with the selected language code. Yes. And then the step 2 is going to be to now go into the backend and actually make a flow in Power Automate. So to do the step 2, this is what the flow is going to look like. To give you a brief idea, so what we do is we actually get the inputs from Power Apps, which is the very first node. And then we initialize a variable. I'm going to talk about what variable we're going to be initializing. Then we're going to be using a translate text node by Microsoft to translate this text into a different language, or the language actually which is selected by the user. We're going to use the apply to each node to actually set variables, which I'll talk about next. And then whatever the output is, we're going to respond back to our Power App. So the flow seems pretty decent with like 5 nodes, but it's going to do a lot in these 5 nodes. So the first one is going to be that we're going to get inputs from the app to the flow. So the inputs are going to be the text that we want to translate, and also the language that we want to translate in. So naturally, we have the text, which was the transcribed text that we got from Charles's initial module. And then the language comes from the dropdown that the user selected. So these are the 2 inputs that we get from Power Apps. And now we're going to pass these on to the next node. So in the next node, we just initialize a variable, which is the output of the translation text. So the translated text, which is going to be our output, we just initialize it here before we actually translate. And the next node is going to be the translate text node, where the target language is actually the selected language. So you remember the language code that we were talking about in the dropdown? That's the same language code that we pass in the target language field. And the body text is going to be the transcribed text that we get initially from Charles's module that we wanted to translate. And remember, both of these were the inputs that came in from the very first node. So now you see how the variables keep flowing throughout the flow, and then we get an output in the end.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
What was really interesting is Fiducia and I were working on different, and I think Ola and Somalise too. And I actually, this module I actually did as a translator connector inside of Power Apps. So we did it two different ways, which is kind of the beauty of Power Apps and Power Automate, is you have some options on how you want to run it. So I ran this inside of Power Apps and you ran it inside of Power Automate.
Yes. And I would say the connection that Power Automate has inside of Power Apps is so powerful because you can actually see the dynamic inputs there. I love this feature.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's go ahead into the next slide. So the next node is going to be where we apply to each. So here what we are going to do is, so the output from the translate text is going to be under the body tab. So what we do is just we loop to get the body tab from the last node. And then we set the variable of the initialized variable that we did before. So we initialized the output, which was the translated text. And now we just set that variable to the translated text property, which is in the body. So if you actually go through the steps that Charles did in Power Automate, you can see the whole body flowing through. But just for in the interest of time, I just have the screenshots of the Power Automate of the Power Automate screen from Power Apps that I did. So we just set the variable right now, and then we send this back to our Power App. So what we do is we set the variable as translated text output, and we just send the output translation back to our Power App. So a quick recap of what we did was we had the drop down, we selected the language, and then we had the whole flow set up. Step 3 is going to be to run the flow. How do we want to run the flow? It's going to be on the click of a button. So what do you want to do? What do you want to let a user do is they have transcribed text, choose the language, and then you press the button to actually get translated text, which is in the 8th step. So on the select of the button, you can actually set the variable, which is results in our case. And Charles spoke about this before. And then after setting the variable, you can call the flow to run, which in my case is translate transcribed text. And on running, remember the two inputs that you were giving in the very first node. So the first input is going to be selected language, which comes from the dropdown that we talked before. And the second input is going to be the transcribed text, which in my case is the text that's coming from the 5th step, which is text input 1 widget. So these are the two arguments that I passed to the flow. We run the flow and we set the output as results. Okay, and the next one is going to be the very last step where we pull the output from the flow that we ran. So we set the variable as results in the last step, and we're just going to get the translated text output that we set in the flow. And that's going to be the 8th step where we get the output from the flow. So I know this is a lot to remember right now, but don't worry, this is an on-demand session. You can also have this see this later, and we're also going to be writing content for you to revisit this and build the app for yourself. Charles, do you have anything to add here?
No, it was a lot. We had a lot learned. We actually put a lot away that we didn't put into this. So that's where the blog is going to be important. But I did want to mention, and I'm trying to set up a demo, your point about when you use Power Automate and you create each node, what's really cool is when you create the next node, you can say, get the output from the previous node or the 3 steps beforehand, and it's just a click of a button and the output becomes your input variable. And that was so easy to use because you didn't have to write any code, that I thought I want to emphasize that, Vidushi, because that was so helpful for me. And I'll try to do a demo too.
Definitely. Yes. And now that we've done all this, let's see what the demo looks like. So let's test this out. So we select the language here to French. We click on the button translate, and then you see that now the text, it's a sunny day today, is translated to I don't know French, but it's translated to the French version of the text. I mean, I do know French, but not in the right accent. So this is what the demo looks like for this module. Any questions, you can put them in the chat. Charles, do you want to talk about and give a brief idea about converting this translated text to speech?
Yeah, sure. I think I mislabeled this. So it was this how I use Speech Studio, and I think I have a few slides. Can you go to the next slide?
Sure. That's okay. If you want, I can go ahead and talk about the app, and we can come back later for debugging.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes, perfect. Yes. So to convert this translated text back to speech, we're actually going to build a flow first and then do the same steps of getting it back into the app and getting stuff from the app. So this one's going to be a longer flow because we're going to be doing multiple steps here, but it's okay. We all got this. So what we're going to do is initially have Power Apps the Power Automate flow communicate with Power Apps to get inputs. We're going to initialize about 3 variables, get the transcriptions, which is Azure BAT speech to text node, and then loop through some values, then convert this text to speech, then store it in a variable and respond back to Power Apps. So it's a lengthy flow, but we're going to walk through this. So the first one is going to be that we're going to get 4 inputs. For in our case, you can definitely go for 3 inputs, 2 inputs, or whatever inputs you like. So here I'm going to be getting the selected language. So this language was the language that the user actually selected in the dropdown before. Then we're going to be getting the language code, which was, again, the variable that we initialized earlier in the dropdown, which had the language code. We're going to be getting the translated text, which was the text in French, and the transcribed text, which was the text in English we had before. So necessarily what we're doing here is the text in English was translated to French in text, and then now we're going to convert this French text into audio. So the next note is going to be, we're going to initialize a variable to get text from the audio. So just initialize a variable, which was text1 in my case from the app. And then we're going to initialize another variable, which is going to be the translated text. Again, this comes from the app, and you can use dynamic input feature from Power Automate and Power Apps. And the next one is going to be that we initialize a variable for the audio. So this is actually going to be the speech that we get at the very end of our translated text. So it's the translated speech. Sorry. And now that we have these variables set up, so we have the language that we needed, we have the text that we wanted to convert to speech, and now we also have a variable set up for the speech audio. We actually get all the transcriptions from the Azure service. Remember the Azure service that was initialized before in module 1, where Charles spoke about the Azure blob storage and how we got the transcriptions from running through the audio in the blob storage. So this is what we are going to do. This step just ensures that without doing the intermediate steps where you actually show the translated text, you could actually just loop through the whole thing without showing the intermediate steps by just tapping into your blob storage again. So you can do that, totally optional. And then you can have a for loop for each loop to get every transcription individually. So now we do a do until to see to get the recently created transcriptions, and we do this until the job has succeeded or failed. A lot of this is usually done automatically. When you start putting nodes in Power Automate, it keeps adding stuff by itself where you just have to put dynamic inputs. So this does seem like a lot, but when you get to do it, if you follow along at that moment, when you keep putting dynamic inputs, it starts making the loops for you. So that should be pretty smooth. And then it ensures that you run until the transcription job is succeeded, or the flow just fails. So we want to make sure that the whole of the transcription is running and we translate the whole thing rather than just stopping the job right in the middle. And now we do is we convert this text with SSML. We specify the voice that we want to, and we give a text input. So can you see the translated text? That's the which is a dynamic input here in this node. So this translated text was the text that we translated in French. The language code, you can see French right there, which comes from the input we initialized earlier. And then you can see a voice name, which is English, US, Ryan, which is a multilingual neural voice. So you can choose voices that you like. There's also Jenny, I believe, for a female voice. So just choose one that is multilingual, and then you can have like them talking in the accent that we want to. And the last one is you store this text to the speech audio variable we initialized before. So remember, we initialized 3 variables before. Just store the output back into an audio variable. Yes. And last but not the least, we're gonna set this send this back to Power Apps. So the audio file is the text to speech audio variable here, which is coming back from this node, which we initialized before, and is coming from the Azure service here. So we've done a lot. Now what we're gonna do is we have the flow, but our Power App looks pretty clean. So what we're gonna do is run the flow on the click of a button. To do that, just set a variable that gets set when you click the button. Call the flow that you want to run, which is transcribed text to speech in my case. um, Run it with the 4 variables that we were passing as inputs. So the first one going to be the language, the second one is going to be the code of the language, the third one was the translated text that we had, and the fourth one was the transcribed text that we had. So these 4 texts, these 4 inputs go into your flow, and these were initialized before, and then you set the variable as a variable flow result. Last but not the least is going to be outputting this flow's result onto the Power Apps. So what we do right now is the variable that we set on the button before, you just call that and get the output from the flow, which was text to speech audio. Remember we saw this here. I'm actually going to go back. Yes. So the text to speech audio in the very last node, very last line, that's going to be called here in this audio media property of the audio widget. Um, and then you're done with this module as well. Pretty easy, but I mean, it looks pretty easy, but we had a challenging phase to go through this. Charles, you want to add anything here before I actually show them how this works?
No, I think one of the biggest issues we ran into here was the SSML that you had to write for the connector. And I'll show a little tip in the next few slides on how to write that, or have Speech Studio write that. But I think that was the biggest hang up at this last part, right? If I recall. What are your thoughts? What was the biggest challenge on this part?
I think this flow and debugging this flow was so difficult because initially, like, we had so we have 3 variables here, and this took me the longest while because the extracted text and the translated text was not giving an output here, and which is why this audio feature would not populate any audio value, even though I would get an audio here. And actually, to debug, I'm going to give you a tip. Just open every node possible, look at its output, and see that the variable keeps passing through. The flow succeeds, the flow builds fine. But then it's just that you don't get an output in the very end. And don't look at your inputs and final output. Look at the output in every node. And that's how you'll figure out where you're missing one variable being passed. And that was what in my case it was. So at the very end I was able to get an extracted text and a translated text value, and only then was the speech being generated for me, like being outputted for me in the audio widget. So that was the most challenging one for me in my case. I think it was the same for you as well, right?
Yeah, I think you're right, because I brought in that template from the Speech Studio, and I kept trying to run the whole thing without understanding it, and it kept erroring out. And finally, I just copied one by one and ran each node separately and looked at the output. And that's when everything made sense to me. So I'm glad Power Automate has all of that. Yep. And so, yeah, that was helpful, like you said, to go step by step and just make sure each node works before you go to the next one.
Definitely. All right. So we're done with all of this. Let's look at what this looks like. I'm going to give you a heads up. We're going to spend 17 seconds looking at just the flow run on Power Apps. I'm doing this to give you an idea that it usually takes about 17 to 18 seconds for me for the flow to run and then get an audio. So don't worry if your flow is running for like 30 seconds and you'll be like, okay, I don't think this works for me. It will actually work. So I hit and play here. So you see that I hit the button here, and now the flow is going to run for 17 seconds. You can see some small dots going up on the top. But yes, essentially, we had the transcribed text. We chose French language. We hit on the button translate to translate our text into French. And this was what I covered initially. And then we hit the button to translate to audio. You can see.
C'est une journée ensoleillée aujourd'hui.
Can you hear that?
C'est une journée ensoleillée aujourd'hui.
Yes. I hope the audio was clear.
I heard it here. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So now you were successfully able to get transcription from your audio, translate it into the desired language, hit a button to convert this text back into audio. So I think that was the third bit of the module essentially. Charles, do you have anything to say before we? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for this, I remember both you and I, once we got that audio out in a different language, I mean, that was magical moment, right? To get all those pieces together. And there's a lot of improvements you can make, but hopefully we post this blog as it is, so you can follow through and then make the improvements you need. And then I just have a few slides to help people use Speech Studio. And then we're going to try one more demo, and hopefully I don't vanish again.
Yeah, sure.
Oh yeah, so this is the demo, and then so I just set up a quick initialize variable, do an HTTP request, and I wanted to show what you were saying, which is when you click on this, all of the variables from the previous steps show up. So all you have to do is click it, and boom, there it is, and then you just run that test, and you watch that variable populate. Right, so magical, so easy. So anyways, back to the slides. That's all I wanted to do with the live demo.
Okay, perfect.
And then do we have, is my next slide in there? This is your video, right?
Yes. This is there. You want to talk about speech?
Oh, so we got this out of order, which is perfect live moment. I was standing there like awkward silence, but this is what I want to talk about. So if you log into Speech Studio and you go to Voice Gallery, and it's hard to see, but on the left there, you see, I try to focus on that. Yep. You click on that, and then it goes into this Azure AI Studio. And you can see there, Jenny Multilingual. That's what Fiduci was talking about, is if you use the other voices, you have to specify the voice of the output, and that makes the code so much harder. So what we did is just select Jenny Multilingual, and then you see on the red arrow, you say, go to audio content creation, and then you click on that SSML. If you could highlight the SSML toggle, Fiduci, where that yellow call out is, you click on that and just copy that SSML into your Power Automate flow, into, I think it's the body of the connector, and everything just works. Like, it's so easy, because we were fighting writing that SSML for a long time, but if you just copy it in, it's just, it's a click of a button and you're ready to go. So that was what I wanted to talk about, was you use Speech Studio because it helps a lot. And then I think my demo is basically what you did. So it was kind of the full demo. So we don't need to do that again. But is there another slide on Speech Studio where I might try to show?
I think that should be it.
It.
Yeah,
Okay.
This one's the full demo of the app,
okay,
where you start recording and we have an audio. Do you want to go ahead with this one?
Yeah, let's do that in between. And then Anna, I have a quick demo after this video. So
This
yeah,
is
I
my
pushed the
first
button
Learn Live broadcast.
and I tried to cut out some of the weights. So this is sending that file into batch storage and pulling out the transcription in that first flow I talked about. So you can see there, it's kind of small, but this is my first Learn Live broadcast. And then I had to select the language. I said French. So there's the French. And that part is pretty fast. And then convert into. So it was quiet on my recording, but you could hear the French. So it was magical when we heard that. And we did it in Hindi the other day. It was cool. Vidushi was like, "Oh, does it say Elwood in the text?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've said my last name." So, but if we could go to my screen real quick. A second part of this was the first part was the speech to text, and you saw the connector, right? And the code didn't make a lot of sense to me, but it, when you go into Speech Studio, you can select the model you want, like Whisper or batch transcription. You upload your file here, and then the audio plays back here. So it's like a complete user interface for that connector, and makes it easy for you to try out before you write the connector. And then these are the resources. If you go to the bottom of the page, Power Platform Connector, that's where you go and find that template that I was talking about with that complete flow. And then we just modified the flow and it was so easy. So that was all I wanted to show on that slide.
Perfect. Sounds good. Yes, so if there are any questions, you can put them up in the Q&A. We can have them answered for you. But let's quickly do a small knowledge check with whatever we spoke about. So I think you all should be able to respond to the questions that we have here. Yes, that's the link casted for you. So the first one is going to be what service provides speech to text functionality in the solution. I'm going to give you time to answer this, but I think we did mention this like a lot of times in our presentation.
Yeah, no, I guess we can kind of talk about what service provides speech to text functionality. And then you saw there on Speech Studio too, you can select even other resources like Whisper, which is a fun one to experiment with too.
Yes. Okay, so we have people answering in the chat as well. Yes, and I'm going to quickly pull up the responses from the poll to see. Yes, so okay, perfect. So let's dive into the answer. What do you say?
Yeah, let's go into the answer. I'm getting some notes that the poll maybe is not the right one, so we'll just go into the answer.
Okay, sure. So we're actually using Speech API. So we did show the Speech API in the flows before, and Canvas controls is usually just like the canvas is where you build the app on Power Apps. Yes, Charles, do you have anything more to add?
No, I'm fascinated by live shows and how we're just like adapting to this. But yeah, Speech Studio, if you log into there, you'll learn about the REST API. The one thing I wanted to mention was I went to the Speech Studio and I went to the Translator, it's kind of studio. And then I said, well, show me I think it was in the Learn documents about the Translator. I was like, show me the API. And it said there's no actually official REST API commands for the Translator part. And that's why one of the reasons we switched to using that Translator connector, because the API wasn't built out in the studio. So I wanted to mention that's why we kind of switch different connectors within our system.
Yeah, perfect. Sounds good. Then the next one is where should the API keys be stored in Power Apps solution? I think you can solve this one by elimination, as far as I know. Yes. If there's some answers in the chat.
Oh yeah, put your answers in the chat because the polls I think aren't quite working. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm curious too. So I hadn't used SAS tokens before. I kind of didn't know how they worked. but it was kind of cool. You go into the blob storage in Azure and you say, I want to generate a SAS token. And you could say, I want it valid from this time to this time, this date to this date. And then boom, and then it gives you a URL. Or you saw that connector where it auto generates, I think, a SAS token for that blob storage for you. So that was super fun.
Perfect. So I'm going to be talking about this one, and you can add in. So the correct answer is going to be API connections, because you never want to specify keys directly in formula bars. That's A, you should never release your keys. B, you don't need them in formula bars because you're actually running flows in formula bars. So you don't need to do that. And there is no option to write your keys in formula bars. The next one is going to be in app settings. So app settings is not where you specify details about your API. You actually do it in API connections, because that's where you can see all your connections. Remember the very first module where Charles showed that he added data sources? That's where you get the prompt for adding an API key, and which gets stored in API connections. You don't really have to go in the app settings to put your API keys in, and never in formula bars. Please remember to not reveal your API keys, just like we did not reveal any of ours.
Yeah,
Do you have any?
yeah, you're right. So I was talking about generating the tokens with kind of authorization, but you're right. There's when you build the connectors, you put the keys in there, and it kind of automatically generates those connections for you with that embedded. And then there was the HTTP GET request. I think I had to create in the header an authorization key and copy that in. So it was inside one of the nodes inside the HTTP GET request where I had that authorization. So we should probably spell this all out in the blog, because that's one of the things I struggled with, was there's authorizations all over the place.
Yes. And please remember that if you have an error in your API key, your service is not going to be authorized. You're not going to be able to run the flow at all. And don't worry, I think someone's in the chat who's being worried about their answers. Don't worry, we're also there. Like, we also did wrong answers initially, but only after we started building the app was when we realized, okay, this is where you specify API connections. So don't worry, you got this. You can make this app. And the last question is, how can the speech API model be improved over time? This is not something that we covered in the session, but you can think about this one. It's gonna be a little tricky though, if you're not very aware about how the speech API works or how machine learning models work. But yes, you're all good. We did great in the app. You don't have to worry about your answers. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. Yes.
Yeah. How can speech API model be improved over time? And so I was really interested in this session because I work with custom neural voice, where I help people who've lost their voice create, a voice. And the more samples you feed into the model, the better it's, the more it sounds like that person. So I actually want to modify this app and help the people I work with. But yeah, the more samples you put in, the more it improves it. And there's also a custom, let's say, speech to text module too, where you can add samples of your voice and work on the transcription and improve how it understands your particular voice. So there's more training that you can do with the speech API to improve recognition on both the input side, the speech to text, and then from the text to speech, the output side too.
Yeah, that's great. And like how I would do this with elimination was, how I understand is, increasing API call volumes is just going to enable you to do more calls to the API, but that does not cause any improvement in the model per se. You can just have more calls to the API, or like run more the flow numerous times. And purchasing more keys is also just like using the same model again for like multiple purposes. But like the improvement will only happen if you train the model with more speech samples. So that would be my answer again from elimination. Let's do a quick wrap up. That's Charles and me. Our LinkedIn links are here. Anytime you have doubts about this app, about the blog, about anything in general, you can always hit us up. We have QR codes to our LinkedIn. Charles, you can add anything if you want to.
So I'm newer to all this. I just started my AI journey and the MVP journey about 1.5 years ago. And I've leaned on GPT-4, ChatGPT a lot. For example, a lot of documentation uses curl commands. So I would just go into ChatGPT, it's like, this is the curl command. How do I convert this into Postman? And what do I need to put in all the different tabs and stuff? And it would convert it, right? And I did the same thing with this, where I said, hey, this is the curl command, and I want to turn this into this Powder Automate Flow HTML GET requests, and it would just tell you step by step, right? So I think, that was scary for me before this, but now that I have this and AI and Power Apps and Automate, it feels like anything is possible, right? So that's, I guess, what I want to conclude with is, just use these tools and lean on us and connect with us on LinkedIn. And, we had so much fun, right, Vidushi?
Definitely. The rush of like, oh, are we going to get this app done? And then like to today, actually building out the whole app here and running them through the process is, it's so good. Yeah.
Yeah. And we actually delayed this 1 week because a couple of weeks ago, we were like, we don't know if we could do this show, right? So it was so cool that it all came together and we fought through it and made this work. So yeah. So like the person that was saying there's sometimes wrong answers, we ran into those over and over and over again. But now we have a collection of the right answers, and we want to put them in a blog post so that everybody can kind of get to the same point, because it was so magical when it spoke in a different language and it translated what you had just said.
Yes, definitely. And just a quick reminder that this is the Learn Life module. It's interactive. You can watch videos, practice, and you can rewatch the whole series, as Carlotta said before. It's on demand for you. And I just wanted to take a moment and thank the Learn Life team, our producer, all of them, Carlotta, Charles for doing such a great session, and our moderator and Somilis for like helping us through building this app, and all of you all for watching this session, and to all the viewers who are going to see this later. Thank you.
And I'll do my Thai. ขอบคุณครับทุกคน
Nice.